Well, first of all, Russia really, as they say, the mountain gave birth to a mouse. Putin did end up doing what many had talked about, written about, hyped up the situation, what Trump talked about, what Russian propagandists wrote about, what we expected, and what I told you could happen, namely a large-scale missile and drone attack. That's what happened last night across many regions. Unfortunately, there are wounded, there have been strikes on our cities. Kherson, Kharkiv, Kyiv was affected, as well as Khmelnytsky region and Volyn. That is, the enemy carried out such a combined attack using Shahed-type drones and other types, as well as Caliber cruise missiles, and also scrambled the remnants, the battered remains of their strategic aviation in the form of Tu-95 aircraft, launching Kh-101 missiles. So essentially, that's what the enemy used. This is what constitutes a major strike. The results regarding the numbers will soon be provided by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Then it will be possible to assess and comment, including on the condition and performance of our air defense system. More details on this will come later. But there was another important event, actually, two important events that happened simultaneously with this. First, about 400 UAVs of various types flew into Russia, targeting different regions: Bryansk, Lipetsk, Moscow, and Oryol. There is a long list of places where these drones flew, and the local authorities, governors, and their regional leadership reported that drones were incoming. And this is a very good trend. In other words, we are not waiting. If you launch Shahed at us, it means our drones will be flying at you in large numbers, so don't get too comfortable. That's the first point. Second, a repeated strike was carried out on the locations of deployment, actually, not just deployment, but the base at that moment of the 26th Missile Brigade of the Russian forces. Iskander-type missiles, ballistic missiles, which were aimed at Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kyiv. In this way, it was possible to prevent the use of these missile systems. This was done the night before, specifically during the night of June 5th to 6th. The videos and photos are already on social media. It's impressive. A massive fire and the detonation of ammunition, specifically, the detonation of the missiles themselves are the results of successful combat operations. In other words, the Iskander systems were hit twice, literally, between the 4th and, well, let's say the 6th, because technically it was already the night of June 5th to 6th. And we can see the results. This has also made it possible to reduce the enemy's capability to use missiles and to carry out attacks. After all, Russia was really counting on the Iskanders. Is Putin planning to enter into any, let's say, constructive negotiations? Obviously not, because after 2 weeks there will be a new memorandum, then another memorandum, and so on. That is why Volodymyr Zelensky, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, is assessing the situation adequately and is stating, among other things, what I have previously talked about on my channel. By the way, while we're at it, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet, because the forecasts are accurate. Let me make a lyrical digression. Recently, the Washington Post, citing its own sources in American intelligence, wrote about Russia's offensive campaign, where it will take place, where the main strike point will be, where the secondary ones will be, and that the main blow will be in the Donetsk region. In other words, they stated this quite clearly. I spoke about this a month ago and even earlier. So what I mean is that the forecasts coincide, and then they are confirmed by other sources, since the information is reliable. Now, returning to Volodymyr Zelensky's statements, he says that true peace can only come after Putin. And he is absolutely right. But an interim solution is possible. And the president of Ukraine calls this interim solution a ceasefire, likely for an extended period. So what does this mean? To stop active hostilities, to somewhat reduce the intensity of the fighting. Well, let's be honest, maybe some people won't like it, but that's what it all means. All of this has the hallmarks of a frozen conflict. No matter how you describe it, that's exactly what it is. To freeze the conflict and outlast Putin meaning to stock up on resilience, to stock up on patience and endurance. And not just to stock up on patience, but to not waste this time to build up our own strength, our own capabilities, our power, the quality and effectiveness of our actions on the battlefield, our actions as a state, including internally, but also our actions on enemy territory. These are sabotage operations. This is what our military intelligence, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense and the Security Service are doing very successfully. This also includes the actions of unmanned systems forces, special operations forces, and other components of the defense forces of Ukraine, which strike deep behind enemy lines on Russian territory at their numerous military facilities in various oblasts and regions. And this is also the strengthening of our defense capabilities, the military-industrial complex that we are developing here, producing more weapons independently, and through joint investment agreements and projects with our European and hopefully American partners as well. So accordingly, we then have to outlast Putin. And based on this, perhaps President of Ukraine Zelensky made a certain hint. After all, on the eve of this, once again commenting to the media on various aspects and highlighting his visit precisely when the president of Ukraine was in Germany, said that we hope the war will already be over by June 2026. At the same time, Volodymyr Zelensky did not specify whether he meant that the full-scale phase of the war would end, or whether we will be living in a ceasefire regime that will last not just 30 days, but 60, 90, and potentially stretch on for months or even years. We cannot rule this out either. Or perhaps this will already be the end of the war, if it is the end of the war. Then maybe the head of the Ukrainian state has certain information, let's say medical in particular, and not only that, which gives him grounds to speak and predict how much longer Putin might live. Perhaps he really does have only until the summer of 2026 left, but perhaps it will actually be a combination of factors. The worsening financial and economic situation in Russia, the inability of the Russian defense industry to absorb funds allocated for weapons production quickly enough, plus a collapse due to health problems for Kadyrov, and possibly his disappearance. And accordingly, the Chechen clans will fight among themselves, which will essentially engulf the Caucasus in a wave of confrontation and discord, and this will spread further. And this will become a hotspot that the Kremlin simply cannot ignore, no matter how obsessed they are with aggression against Ukraine, because it is a factor of internal destabilization, especially against the backdrop of Putin's deteriorating health. This combination of factors could, in the end, lead to a deepening of the crisis phenomena in Russia, which will inevitably affect its ability to wage war against Ukraine. Perhaps this is exactly what Volodymyr Zelensky means. This is how I see the combination of these factors. Well, Putin calls Trump, and the main theme of the whole conversation is supposedly Putin asking Trump to help him, to protect him. Once again, he asks the Americans to help influence official Kyiv to stop, to protect against future operations like Webb or strikes on the Crimean Bridge. In other words, Putin is simply, in reality, asking Trump for salvation so that the US would influence Ukraine to prevent it from carrying out such operations. Moreover, let's take a look, let's analyze why once again did Putin end up in hot water. Well, we both understand perfectly well that whether Russia was preparing some kind of retaliatory strike here, missile or drone attack to show what they are capable of to make the whole world afraid. Were they planning this on the territory of Ukraine? Yes, I think they are planning to. But let's look at this from another point of view. On June honest, explosions reportedly occurred directly at military airfields located within Russian territory. June honest. As of now, when I'm recording this video, it's already June 5 on the calendar. They start talking about the spokesperson, they start looking for some frequencies where negotiations are being conducted during the flights of the doomsday planes and so on. Yes, of course, the planes are conducting negotiations, but notice, as soon as this incident happened, Putin disappeared. Where is Putin? Putin is hiding. Putin is in the bunker. He didn't even go online. He didn't even record a video. He appeared only after the fact. Obviously, they didn't let Putin out because he was shaken because of that list and the anxiety that happened. Well, that's also reality, and they couldn't adequately mobilize or take any concrete measures. Peskov said that Putin was watching everything online. Well, of course, and that's why they really couldn't do anything to counter it. The fact that, yes, of course, the risks of large-scale missile and drone attacks remain in the near future is a fact, and we need to stay vigilant. That's obvious. But time is slipping away. As always, Putin and now Russia are delaying this moment for certain reasons, technical reasons, because they can't help but coordinate their actions and align them with Trump. Well, that's obvious too. Otherwise, why would they need to inform Trump? I will be forced to respond to Ukraine's actions and so on. Dragging it out, dragging this process out, well, that's obvious too. But when it comes to the level of a superpower, the way Russia wanted to present itself, the way Putin wanted to spread through his propaganda, they clearly fall short because you simply can't act like that. Everyone was expecting something saying that there would be a Russian strike any moment, but it hasn't happened. So again, in many ways, these threats just don't actually work. But the risk of a strike still remains.